looking, throwing in the end zone. Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today, we will be going into the 49ers-Eagles NFC Championship rematch that's taking place this Sunday. We're going to start off by talking about some roster moves, what coaches and players have said and are saying about this upcoming rematch, what sports radio personalities are saying about Brock Purdy, in addition to some players as well. We're going to talk about the spread that opened up with San Francisco as a favorite. I have some thoughts on that, and they will go deep dive into 49ers at Eagles, what's at stake, comparing the players, the statistics, the offense and defense, matchups to watch, and I will give a prediction. In the plus section, I'm going to go over 3 NFL games from this past weekend. Green Bay beating Detroit, the Jaguars beating Houston, and the Broncos beating the Browns. We're going to be talking the upcoming college football championship weekend. Conference championship games abound, and we'll look at a projection for who will make the 14 playoff. I will give my long-awaited review of Star Wars: The Last Command from the early 90s, a novel by Timothy Zahn, the last in his Thrawn trilogy, and we will conclude by making Week 13 NFL picks. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So it is officially Eagles week. This is a game that we as fans have had circled on the calendar since the schedule was released in April. And this is something that I'm sure coaches and players were pointing at before the season started. If you go on social media, Twitter specifically, this has turned into a vitriolic pissing match between both fan bases. You have A.J. Brown, who's friends with Deebo Samuel, jokingly gave his followers permission to troll Deebo, a little ribbing there, all in good fun. But when you get to other players, other fans, it is a mean-spirited pissing match that will be settled in some capacity on the field on Sunday, right? It's just one game. There's a lot at stake. We'll go into that. It's one game. These teams may meet again in the playoffs. It's a redemption game for San Francisco, but it's also a prove-it game for Philadelphia, right? As much as San Francisco wants to say, and us as Niner fans, well, if Purdy was there, it would have been different, and it obviously would have. This is a chance for the Eagles, remember, to say, hey, now that you have your full squad, let's see if you can beat us. So this is not just a Niners looking to get revenge. It's the Eagles looking to prove that even without Purdy and without Josh Johnson, that it wasn't a fluke. But before we get there, let's discuss a couple roster moves. So safety George Odom was officially put on IR for a torn bicep, had surgery earlier on in the week, and the 49ers, to fill that roster spot, activated defensive end Robert Beal, rookie out of Georgia. So the 49ers now have 10 defensive linemen on their 53-man roster, 6 cornerbacks, and only 2 safeties, which means, even though I predicted it last week and it did not come true, the 49ers will be, even though they haven't elevated him yet, I would be shocked if they don't elevate practice squad safety Taylor Hawkins for this game. This is a game where any game you need more than two safeties active. They got away with it last week against Seattle. There was some discussion that Isaiah Oliver, who has played safety in the past just a bit, could step into that role. He is the backup nickel corner now beyond Diamador Lenore. But it's a couple other roster moves. So the 49ers signed another cornerback to their practice squad. Since they had none, I thought this was a good move. Keemon Hall and safety Eric Harris also signed to the practice squad. They wound up releasing offensive lineman Henry Bird, which is fine because there are 10 offensive linemen on the 53-man roster, and I still believe 3 or 4 offensive linemen on the practice squad. That is more than enough. But looking at these signings, so Keemon Hall, 5'11", 190 pounds. He was an undrafted free agent of the LA Chargers in 2019, has gotten sparse playing time. Eric Harris, more seasoned, 33 years old, 6'2", 225, played for Atlanta last year. Big-time hitter. Maybe not as fluid in coverage as Hufanga wasn't a great coverage safety. He was more in the box, 5 to 7 yards away from the line of scrimmage, blitzing, making his presence felt there. Harris, I can't imagine him being elevated. He just does not know the defense yet. And Hawkins, even though a younger player, will be elevated for the Philadelphia game. And then who knows, maybe they alternate elevations so they're able to keep both players on the practice squad for as long as possible. There is some optimism that George Odom could be ready for, maybe not ready for the playoffs, but could be part of a deep playoff run, maybe starting in the divisional round, coming back from that bicep tear. So they have options, 2 safeties on the practice squad, Isaiah Oliver, who could fill in a pinch, maybe not a worldly type of safety, or there is obviously going to be some drop-off between Oliver, Hawkins, when Harris gets up to speed. And the 49ers aren't done. Like, if there's an injury somewhere or they feel like there is another safety out there that can help them, they'll pull the trigger. This team is all in to win the Super Bowl and to obviously to make a deep run and get to and win the Super Bowl. And if they see their safeties, or if Jair Brown or Talanoa Hufanga gets injured or even has to miss maybe a game or two, an ankle sprain, whatever it may be, I don't think Lynch is going to hesitate to pull the trigger and bring in a free agent to help supplement the safeties in the secondary room. So now let's look back to May, what Kyle Shanahan had to say about this matchup when the schedule was released. Quote, "I'm glad we're not playing Philly week 1. I want to play them at a better time. I want to make sure our whole team is right there. We feel like we didn't get to do it last time, and I'm ready to go back again." So if you remember, back in May, there was still some indecision, or it was up in the air if Brock Purdy would be ready to start the regular season. And I was one that doubted that he would be ready for the regular season. Maybe he starts on short-term IR or the PUP list, having him miss the first month of the season. But his healing accelerated, any expectations that I think the medical staff had. I mean, they saw him every day. We didn't, so I'm sure they knew how he was tracking better than the outside world did. But that was Shanahan giving a nod to, hey, if we play Philly week 1 or the first month, we might not have our quarterback. And that's the most important position in pro sports. That's who you can ill afford to lose going into any game, but especially a big game with the defending NFC champions. The 49ers, for the most part, outside of Talanoa Hufanga, are healthy. I mean, they're missing some backups. Drake Jackson's on IR. George Odom's on IR. Spencer Burford, I think, is questionable, but he may return to the starting lineup with a knee injury or whatever it may be. And he actually did return to practice this week, so he's trending in the right direction. The 49ers are pretty healthy at this point. Unless there are major injuries during the game, this should be a no excuses during the game. And for folks out there, losing Brock Purdy, if you want to say it was an excuse, but anybody that knows anything about football or is not an Eagles fan understood how much the game changed on that play, on that injury, and then compounded with Josh Johnson going out earlier in the third quarter. It's just a fact. And let's transition to something that Philadelphia outside linebacker Hassan Reddick has said. I guess it was leading up to, this game a few days ago. Quote, "Talk is cheap. They get to come back to the link. There's a lot of boo-hoos last year, a lot of crying, a lot of what ifs, a lot of this, a lot of that. They get a chance to come back in here, line that shit up, and prove it again." Absolutely. But I just want to remind Hassan Reddick, Eagles fans, if you're listening, although I'm sure you're not, and 49er fans, that this was a 7-7 game in the second quarter with Brock Purdy out, with Josh Johnson in. It was a 14-7 Philadelphia lead at the end of the half when Shanahan went full retard, if you, and I hate to say that, but a nod to Tropic Thunder, the comedy with Robert Downey Jr., amongst others, that he decided to throw passes with Johnson at the end of the half. Johnson fumbled. It got to 21-7. Game was really over at that point, and then Josh Johnson got knocked out early in the third quarter. You go into the half 14-7, you gather yourself, you come out, and that's not to say that Johnson wouldn't fumble, there wouldn't be a pick six or whatever, but you don't go down 2 scores with your fourth-string quarterback. You can go down 1 score, and remember, that was a game where Shanahan did not challenge the Devontae Smith catch down the sideline, which was not a catch. That was a third down, would have led to a punt. That's 7 less points there. There was fair catch interference. There was a fumble return. So the Niners, in a lot of ways, gifted the Eagles like 14 points, maybe even 21 if you want to count at the end of the half. Once Purdy got hurt, I highly doubt Josh Johnson would have been able to rally them, even if the Niners defense would have been able to hold the Eagles to 17 points or 21 points. It would have been a tall order. He was a deer in the headlights, Josh Johnson, right? The game was just too big for him. That's okay. But for Hassan Reddick, a lot of boo-hoos, a lot of crying, this or that. Play it out the other way, man. If Jalen Hurts was knocked out on the first drive, and that's when Purdy went out, the first drive, he was 2 for 2 before he got hurt. They were moving the ball well, and then bang, done for the rest of the game. If Hurts was knocked out the first game, what happens, Eagle fans? And Purdy was healthy. What happens? You really still think you win that game? Take it a step further. If Gardner Minshew, the backup, was knocked out, like Josh Johnson was, and the Niners quarterback room is healthy, do you really think you win that game? Of course you don't. So, yeah, I mean, is there, if you want to call it crying, yeah, there's crying. I'm just a fan, and I was bitter. And I think football fans that were not rooting for the Niners or the Eagles feel like they got robbed. Because you want it, not that you want to see both teams healthy, but you want to see a competitive game. The Niners were playing with 10 players, especially for the vast majority of the second half when Johnson got hurt and Purdy could not throw the ball. A lot different game, Eagles and Eagle fans, if your quarterback and backup were both hurt. And oh, by the way, talking about boo-hoos and pissing and moaning and crying, Super Bowl, you guys were crying about the field being too slippery, not being able to mitigating your rush. And I know you had 70 sacks last regular season, and you're not really on pace for that now, but it affected your pass rush. The no call on the hold, or the call on James Bradbury, that was a hold. That should have been a non-call. You guys have had your fair share of crying too, right? And not to say that a straight up game on Sunday is going to alleviate any of that or anything, but don't pretend that the NFC Championship game would not have been drastically different if it was your quarterbacks that went through what the Niner quarterbacks went through. Hey, that's part of the game. Injuries are part of the game. It happens. But the only reason it wasn't competitive is because the Niners didn't have a quarterback for close to half the game. So what are other players saying? We'll start with Debo. In the offseason, when he was asked about the NFC Championship game, here was Debo's response. I ain't going to keep going on about what could have happened or what would have happened, but yeah, it would have been different. It would have definitely been a different outcome. We lost because we played with 10 people. It's just common sense, guys. I remember I'd picked the Niners. Well, maybe you don't remember. I picked the Niners to lose that game. I thought Philly was going to win in a close game. So I wasn't one of those homers like, oh, they would have won if the Niners would have won if their quarterbacks were healthy and the Eagle quarterbacks weren't. Just a friggin' fact. More recent quote this week from Debo. Quote, we know we're coming out there and playing Niner football. And hey, we're playing pretty good ball right now. I feel like it's going to be a good matchup and may the best team win. Debo did call cornerback James Bradbury trash in the offseason, and someone asked him about that, and he doesn't regret it. What is he going to walk it back and be like, yeah, I shouldn't have said that? Like, you could have your opinions on players, and I'm sure there's people that don't think really highly of Debo or other players on the Niners. Fine. They're just words. And even if you're going to get into a fight on the football field, throwing punches when people are wearing shoulder pads and helmets, that doesn't make you tough. That makes you dumb, because you could break your hand on throwing a punch at someone's helmet. More quotes. Fellow receiver Brandon Ayuk, quote, we definitely know what happened last season. A lot of words going back and forth. But despite that, we got another opportunity, and they have another opportunity to play football. I think most of the guys are excited for that. Absolutely. Eagles are 10-1. Niners are 8-3. This has a lot to do with potential seeding in the NFC playoffs. These are the NFC's 2 top teams. Sorry, Dallas. You have not beaten a team with more than 4 wins all season. Every one of your wins, Dallas, no matter how good you've looked, has come against a team at least 2 games under 500. At least. These are the 2 best teams in the NFC. Even, giving a nod to Detroit, not looking good the past couple weeks. Detroit, we're going to get into that in the plus section. So a lot of people should be excited. I'm hoping this is a nationally televised game, or at least in the Northeast. And it should be, because the Giants are on a bye. Nick Bosa, a couple quotes. Quote, I'm not much of a trash talker myself, but I think it's a huge game, obviously with the seeding and all that. We're different teams this year. We're at different spots and in different conditions than we were when we played last year. And that's just a subtle nod to the whole Purdy industry. There are obviously different players on each team. Niners with a healthy Purdy, adding Chase Young, and then adding Javon Hargrave from Philadelphia. But you can almost say that's a wash between adding Jalen Carter and the other players that they have at that defensive tackle spot. More from Bosa. I think the Eagles are really good, and they found ways to win this year, so it's just going to be another game where we have to execute, and I'm extremely confident this go-round. I was confident last year, but some things early in the game definitely hurt Brock Purdy, but we're just excited for another opportunity. That's how I have to look at it. Each game is an opportunity. Each game is a season of one. One play at a time, one drive at a time, one quarter at a time, one game at a time. It's cliche, but it's true. The Niners are not going to get the number 1 seed in the NFC by beating Philadelphia. Philadelphia has a really good chance getting the number 1 seed by beating the Niners, but they still have to beat Dallas and take care of business in their division and the rest of the way. But it would really put the Niners in a hole if Philadelphia gets this game. Now, another player, George Kittle, not talking about the matchup, talking about Brock, because there still are Purdy doubters out there. And it's only because he was a 7th-round pick, the last pick in the draft. If he was a 1st-round pick, top 15, top 10, top 5, the media would be drooling all over him. They would be lining up to get on their knees and suck at the fountain of Brock. It's just a fact. Perception overrules reality, or the perception of what they think a 7th-round quarterback should be. And George Kittle is not buying into that. Quote, Brock's just got such a knack with the ball. And also, when you have a quarterback that when he steps into the huddle and 10 sets of eyes just snap to him and listen to every single word he says, whether it's the play call, whether it's, hey, we got to get this one, or whatever it is, he just lifts players up. Our entire offense, he lifts us all up to be playing at a higher level. This is the highest level the 49er offense has been playing since Shanahan got here. I've read stats in previous podcasts. It is the most efficient passing offense in the NFL. I've read you stats why Brock Purdy is not a dink and dunk passer. And if you want to say Jimmy Garoppolo was an average quarterback or slightly above average quarterback in Shanahan's system, then what is Purdy? If Purdy is operating this offense at a higher level than any other quarterback at any other time during Shanahan's time with the 49ers, and if Jimmy Garoppolo was average or above average, then Purdy is above that. He's exceeding that. And Jonas Knox of Fox Sports Radio, this is what he had to say on Brock. This is a part of a 4.5-minute clip that I listened to, and it's not because I'm a Niner fan. It's because I'm a level-headed, objective fan that watches him play, that watches every play, sometimes multiple times if I go back and watch a game again, and you can just see the football IQ, see the decisiveness, see the savvy, see the processing, the distributing the ball to the right player at the right time, not making killer mistakes. Has he thrown interceptions? Yes, but he's thrown less than Jalen Hurts. He's thrown less than Josh Allen, less than Patrick Mahomes, less than Justin Herbert. But here was the quote from Jonas Knox. There's nothing wrong with being wrong about your evaluation of Brock Purdy. The 49ers are good. Brock Purdy is good. And if you don't see it by now, you might be an idiot. There are people that are willing to die on the sword that Brock Purdy is not a good quarterback and it's Shanahan's system and it's the weapons and da-da-da. Bill's got a lot of weapons. Josh Allen's leading the league in picks. Herbert's got weapons. Teams, 4-6, 4-7. Joe Burrow was playing good for 1 or 2 games, and he has a ton of weapons as well. There are teams that have weapons that are not playing, quarterbacks are not playing as well as Purdy, or the team in general are not playing as well as Purdy. Yeah, the Niners team is stacked. All pros on defense, all pros on offense. McCaffrey, Kittle, Ayuk, Trent Williams, Deebo Samuel, defensively, Bosa, Young, Hargrave. The list goes on and on. That's fine. But I live in the Northeast. How many years have the Yankees been putting together an all-star team on the field? And they haven't won a World Series in 15 years? Getting to the postseason, ALCS, Division Series, doesn't guarantee you anything, right? And just because there are a lot of good players on the team doesn't mean that Brock's automatically going to be good. It just doesn't. There's a lot of quarterbacks you can put on this team that are not going to fare half as well as Brock Purdy did. But for the people that are willing to die on the hill, that are only going to apologize when Brock Purdy wins a Super Bowl. I mean, does that mean Dan Marino isn't a top 10 quarterback of all time? He got to a Super Bowl his second year against the Niners, lost, never got back. I think winning a Super Bowl validates someone like, in a way, Mahomes, of how great you saw he was in the regular season and what kind of trajectory his career was on. Then to get a Super Bowl and an MVP, another stratosphere. Then he gets a second and another MVP. I guess even a higher of a stratosphere. Tom Brady, different quarterback, 3 Super Bowl wins or 4 versus 7. And 7's like a ridiculous number. Your legacy is cemented with 3 or 4. 5, 6, and 7 just wind up being gravy and then just separate you even more. But the idea that Purdy has to win this game, why? He didn't even play last season. He was in for 6 plays. He didn't cost them the game against Philadelphia. He beat the Seahawks, beat the Cowboys, was undefeated up to that point, gets hurt, Niners lose, and they lose bad. Although, again, at least 2 of those touchdowns were gift touchdowns to the Eagles. If you want to say Brock Purdy still has some stuff to prove because he's really only in a little more than 1 full season, sure, that's completely fair. But the games, other than the 3 he's lost, have been really friggin' good. And he had a little bit of a rough patch for 3 games and then a really, really strong 3-game stretch after that. And I read the last 2 games or 2 of the last 3 games, his quarterback rating is the highest of any 2-game span by any quarterback in NFL history. I think it was before the Seahawks game. It was the 2 games before that. Pretty darn good. But even if Brock loses this game, even if Brock, they don't win the Super Bowl, are we really going to say, yep, I was right, 7th round pick? People are dug in now. People just don't want to look bad. They want to be the ones that said, yep, I called it. He's not that good. The body, even if when he had the bad 3 games, everybody was forgetting the undefeatedness before that. Selective memory. I'm in advertising. You can craft whatever you want or look at and point to whatever you want to craft your narrative. But if you're only going to look at a bad game, 2 or 3, and ignore the 14 good games before that, then you're a moron. Then you're a talking head in the media. I guarantee you're not watching the whole game or really any of his games in length, and you're just there to talk. It is so apparent when I listen to the radio or TV or other podcasters or other people that just want to talk about sports. When they have something bad to say about Purdy, you can tell how uneducated they are. And I'm not saying he's elite. That's Burrow. Mahomes. I'm not saying he's great. That's Mahomes. I'm not even saying he's a very good quarterback yet. I have him in my above average rankings, somewhere between 9 and 14. To me, that's fair. But people that are still dying on the hill. No matter what he does against Philadelphia, even if he has a Josh Dobbsian 4 interception performance, it just might not have been his day. It's still 90% good, 10% bad. And you'll take that any day of the week. Now, as we transition into this game, if you are not aware, the 49ers opened as a 1.5-point favorite. And now they sit at a 2.5 or 3-point favorite at the vast majority of sports books. So let me just get to what this means historically. Philadelphia will now become the first team in at least 20 years that at a 10-1 or better record at home is an underdog when its starting quarterback is playing. So there's been instances in the past where a really good team maybe sat a player because they might have had a bye or somebody got injured before that game, but the team had a really good record and was at home and played a player in their neighborhood, talent-wise. I'll be honest, I was shocked that the Niners came out as a favorite. I thought Philly would have been, probably a field goal favorite at home if you get 3 points at home. What this spread is saying now, if it's San Francisco 2.5, that on a neutral field, they're a 5.5-point favorite, and in San Francisco, 8.5 point. I don't think they're an 8.5-point favorite in Santa Clara. That's crazy. And I don't know about 5.5 points on a neutral field. Maybe 1.5 or 2. I still don't even think San Francisco should be favored. Neutral field or not. Let me walk that back. I don't think they should be favored. Philly's a tough place to play. This is now bulletin board material for the Eagles. If the Eagles weren't looking at this game saying, we got to shut these Niners up because they're crying a lot about Purdy and not having a quarterback and this, that, what about us? They're coming into our home, a place where the fans have been voted on as the worst fan base in all of football. Their previous stadium, Veteran Stadium, had a jail underneath it. You can go searching for clips where fans were throwing snowballs at Santa Claus, cheering when former Cowboys receiver Michael Irvin was carted off the field. Not cheering like Irvin gave a thumbs up and they were glad that, okay, he's got movement. Cheering because he was hurt. These fans, not every single one of them, I know Eagles fans, but the ones that attend the games, do you want to say half, are probably the lowest of the low. Tough place to play. A lot of teams found that out. Bills, who looked really good for a half and then completely crapped on themselves, and the Eagles just kind of clawed back and got that victory, found out. And then seeing a video of a child, probably no more than 8 years old, in an Eagles jersey, going up to an Eagles fan as everybody was leaving the stadium, for a high five, good game. Eagles fan, an adult, went to give him a high five. The kid pulled away and gave him the finger instead. Are we shocked by that? No. But I'm superstitious. I'm one of not giving Nick Sirianni, who still has the most punchable face in pro sports, or maybe just on the planet, and he's a fellow Italian, but I can say that just because I want to punch his fucking face whenever I see it. Especially, I'm going to want to punch it this weekend. The Niners coming in as a favorite, I think, is disrespectful to Philadelphia. Vegas usually knows what it's doing. Does Vegas cover the spread on every game, everywhere of all time? Of course not. There's upsets. There's lines that you look at and go, oh, that's weird, or an over-under. That's terrible. And we're going to get into one in the plus section for college football. More motivation for the Eagles. And I don't think they need any more. I think the Niners are adequately motivated. I think they're looking at it the right way. I think they got out of their system the whole Purdy couldn't play, now he can play, etc. Surprised. And the line grew from 1.5 to 2.5. Very, very surprised by that. Let's get into the game itself. San Francisco at Philadelphia, 4:25 Eastern on Fox. The number one crew will be there. Kevin Burkhardt, Greg Olsen, among others. What's at stake? So at stake is any chance of the 49ers getting the number one seed. They need to win this game. They still need help. If the 49ers win this game and they win out the rest of the way and finish up 14-3, and Philadelphia loses one more game, they have a game at Dallas. It's going to be a tough game. Philly loses against the Niners and at Dallas, and the Niners win out, they are the number one seed. Doesn't matter what the Lions do. Tall task. The talent on offense for Philadelphia, it's there. Jalen Hurts has thrown for almost 2,700 yards, 18 touchdowns, 10 picks. DeAndre Swift, 770 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. Through the air, 200 yards and a score. Receiver A.J. Brown, already over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. His running mate, Devonta Smith, about 740 yards and 5 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts, even though that Eagles line is very good, has been sacked 29 times on the year, nearly 3 sacks per game. On defense, it starts with the line. Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat at defensive end with 6.5 sacks. Hassan Reddick, outside linebacker rusher, 8.5 sacks. And their starting corners, James Bradbury with 1 interception, Darius Slay with 2. The Eagles have 32 sacks on the season. They are under that 70. They are under the pace of reaching 70 sacks that they reached last year. That was a historic year where a lot of things went right for them, including having different offensive and defensive coordinators. And as a team, they've only generated 6 interceptions. So let's look at where each team stands offensively and defensively. The Eagles are the number 9 rated offense in the NFL, 364.3 yards a game. Passing, they are 13th, 231 yards a game. Rushing, 8th at 133.3, and points scored, tied for 3rd with 28.2. The Niners offense, number 3 in the league, 386.1. Passing, they are 8th, 250.1 per game. Rushing, 7th, 136. And points scored, they're tied with the Eagles, 28.2. So the Niners are either tied or better in each of these categories offensively than the Philadelphia Eagles. Defensively, overall, the Eagles are 19th, allowing 342.4 a game. Passing, 29th, allowing 255.7. Rushing, they are 3rd, allowing 85.3. And points allowed, 20th, allowing 22.4. The 49ers overall, they're the number 5 ranked defense, 295.3 yards per game. Passing, they're 12th with 213.3 yards against. Rushing, 2nd, 82 yards a game. And points, they're the number 1 defense in the league, allowing 15.5 points a game. Each one of these metrics, the Niners are better. Turnover differential, the Niners are plus 11. The Eagles are minus 2. That is a 13 turnover difference between the two teams. Philadelphia, some more metrics. So the Eagles defense versus short passes over the middle of the field, which is what Shanahan likes to do, although, again, they are not dink and dunk. They're ranked 29 in success rate for short passes, 30th in explosive plays allowed, and number 23 in yards after the catch allowed. This is an area that the Niners can exploit. Short, medium passes, likes to throw between the numbers, although Purdy is throwing outside. He is taking his shots deep when they are there. But this is a defense much different than last year. This is a defense that can be had, that has been had by other teams that they've gotten into shootouts against. Now, injury front, the following players for the Eagles are questionable. Tight end Dallas Goedert missed the past several games. He is on track to play. Right tackle Lane Johnson also on track to play. Defensive tackle Fletcher Cox with a groin injury, and linebacker Zach Cunningham, all questionable, but I can see all of them suiting up. Where Jalen Hurts is below Brock Purdy stats-wise, and some people are still saying Jalen Hurts is an MVP candidate. CJ Stroud is more of an MVP candidate than Jalen Hurts is, and you can make the argument that Brock Purdy is more of an MVP candidate than Jalen Hurts is. Hurts just happens to be on the team with the best record, and he is a big reason for that. I'm not downplaying it. But where Purdy is, in my notes, I have a greater than sign. Where Purdy is greater than Hurts, more yards. He has more passing yards than Jalen Hurts on 28 fewer completions. And more than that when it comes to attempts. He has a higher completion percentage than Jalen Hurts. More touchdown passes, fewer interceptions. He's taken less sacks. He has a higher QBR rating and a much higher overall passer rating. I am not suggesting that Brock Purdy is a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts. But the Niners obviously are not coming into this game with a schlub at quarterback. He's not the dual threat that Jalen Hurts is. Yes, Jalen Hurts has 11 rushing touchdowns. Half or more are tush pushes from the 1 yard line, which is not wildly impressive. It's impressive that the Eagles are the only one that can do that effectively, but it's not like he's scampering 20, 30 yards for a score. Matchups to watch, because it was last year's injury that swung the game. The 49ers offensive line against the Eagles D-line. Ken McKivitz and Williams and company hold up against Sweat, Reddick, Brandon Graham, Jalen Carter, everybody that they're going to bring. And the Eagles are built like the Niners. They can come in waves on the defensive line. Flip it around. The Niners D-line against a very good Eagles offensive line. We'll see how healthy Lane Johnson is at tackle. Against the Philadelphia Eagles running game, DeAndre Swift has come on. He's on pace for over 1,000 yards and controlling Jalen Hurts. Any QB draws, any read options, any broken plays that they can limit him getting outside the pocket and picking up yards with his legs. Limits the word. They're not going to eliminate it. They just have to limit it, and hopefully on maybe, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5s, that they can either get home or give him no place to run to, take a sack, throw it out of bounds, whatever it might be. The Niners receivers against the Eagles corners. So Ayuk and Debo against Bradbury and Slay. Then it's going to be Kittle versus whoever they're going to cover him with, whether a safety is going to come down, a linebacker, or play some zone. This secondary is 29th in the league, 255.7 a game. The Niners are averaging 250 a game, so that's probably where Purdy should net out. It'll be great if he can get between 250 and 275 and really have, the running game get to 125, 150 yards to complement. Special teams, Niners special teams, just not good. I'm talking about kick return coverage and punt return coverage. Wisnowski, Bretton Covey, rookie out of Utah, pretty good punt returner. Coffin corner it every time, no matter where you're kicking, and just kick it out of bounds. Moody, get it into the end zone. I will be happy with the Eagles starting at the 25-yard line every time there's a kickoff versus them trying to drop it inside the 5 and the Eagles returning it to the 30 or 35. You got the leg, Moody. Just blast it into or out of the end zone. Same with Mitch Wishnowsky. And the running games, these are two teams that are both top 8 in the league, running for over 133 yards a game. Which running game can be sustained longer? Can the Niners get to 30, 35 carries? I mean, they got to it in the NFC Championship game because they couldn't pass. If they can get an efficient, 30, 35 for $150, close to, between 4 and 5 yards a carry, that will be putting them in really good position to win this game. The Eagles against the Bills defense played really well for 3 quarters and then wore down in the 4th. Now, yes, the Bills would have won that game in overtime. Josh Allen threw a pass to Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis took it to the corner instead of a post to the middle. Would have been caught, would have ended the game. Then, of course, the Eagles march down, and Jalen Hurts takes it in from about, 7-8 yards on a QB draw. The Eagles wear teams down. They have their physical team, just like the Niners. You can argue that they're more physical than the Niners. They have a better offensive line, and their D-lines are comparable, if not slightly better. The Eagles have more sacks on the season. The Niners have 15 sacks the last 3 games since Chase Young has been here. But the Eagles as a team have generated more sacks. The Niners as a team, as a defense, have generated more interceptions. Who's going to win the turnover battle? That's going to be huge, right? If the Niners can get 1 or 2 from Hurts, can someone put it on the ground? But then they have to cash in. It can't be like the Seahawks games or other games where we've watched where they've gotten the ball in plus territory, meaning the Eagles side of the field, and not being able to do anything with it. Of course, the Niners are going to punt. Of course, the Eagles are going to punt. Special teams, pinning the Eagles back deep, but cashing in on opportunities. Are they going to have to go 75, 80 yards sometimes? Sure. But if you could only have to go 55, 60, or 40 yards, make sure you convert to 7 and not 3. Put your foot on the Eagles' throat early. You know they're going to scrap. They're going to claw. They're going to fight. But the Niners are a team, much like all good teams, they are built to play from ahead. And there's this perception that the Niners can't play from behind because they haven't done it yet. And Shanahan's got a terrible record going into the fourth quarter. He's like 1-36 or 1-37 when down by 3 or more points entering the fourth. But newsflash, all coaches have losing records, or the vast majority, and some of the great ones too have losing records and terribly losing records when down going into the fourth quarter, whether 3 points, 7 points, 8 points, whatever it may be. Niner fans, if you're out there and you're traveling, do us all a favor. Don't mess with the goddamn Rocky statue. Everybody wants to go there. Bills fans did it last week. Basically, you want to go there and take pictures because it's a landmark type of statue and you want to pose like Rocky Balboa in your 49er gear. Don't look like you're punching it or don't do it. Like, it's superstition, but I think there's something to it. Don't put a Niners scarf on it. Don't put a jersey. Don't put a pennant, a helmet on him, nothing. Leave the goddamn statue alone. In the grand scheme of things, do I think that's really going to make a difference in the game? No, but I'm superstitious enough, and other people are saying it on Reddit, on Twitter, on other message boards, like, guys, if you're going out there, show a little bit of class. You might think it's funny. Oh, Rocky Balboa is wearing a Niner helmet. Let me get a picture of that with me standing next to him. It's just bad juju, right? It's just like there's something, the universe, the football gods, Sylvester Stallone, the boxing gods, the Philadelphia gods, they don't like that. Just don't do it. Prediction time. I'm giving you a lot of reasons statistically, quarterback comparisons, defensive upgrades of Chase Young and Javon Hargrave. We're missing Talanoa Hufanga. I don't play for the team, but the Niners are missing Hufanga on the back end. The Eagles are dealing with some injuries. People are questionable, probably going to play. Everybody is more or less at full strength. In this game, the Niners will be rolling with 3 quarterbacks just in case anything crazy, happens. And I feel just as confident going into this game as I did going into the NFC Championship game. Remember, the Niners were on a roll, hadn't lost since Purdy came in. Eagles were looking good. The number 1 seed, they deserved it. The Eagles are not looking as good this year as they did last year. They're winning close games. Now, that's what a good team should do. Should a good team be in as many close games as they're in? That's, you could have a conversation about that. Should a good team have lost to the Jets? Probably not. And they've beaten up on some bad teams, but we can all, to a man and a woman, say the Eagles don't look as dominant this year as they did last year, but they'll take it. If I'm an Eagles fan, like, I don't care how dominant or not I look. This isn't college football where there's rankings where how well you look and how much you win by directly plays into how high you're ranked. They're 10-1. They're 2 games up in the NFC and one of the favorites to get to the Super Bowl. This is a tough place to play. Like I said, the Niners have to maybe get out early, score first, get into a double-digit lead, and put the pressure on the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. Make him beat you. We know the Eagles can run the ball, and they have weapons. But I think Ward can line up pretty well against A.J. Brown. I think Ambry Thomas or whoever covers Devonta Smith is going to struggle because he's too fast. And Lenore in the slot, I don't know if he's going to be covering a receiver or if Dallas Goedert coming back for the Eagles is big. They really have not had a tight end presence since he got hurt. And I think he might have been on IR. He's at least missed the last 2, 3, or 4 weeks. That'll be huge if Goddard can come back for them. These are 2 teams generally built the same way from the trenches out. 2 very good quarterbacks. Obviously, Jalen Hurts brings the mobile element. You got 2 good receivers, 2 good tight ends. If Goddard plays, you have a secondary that both of them have underperformed, but as bad as the Niners' pass defense has been, it's been so much better the past 3 weeks. The Niners' pass D is allowing 42 less yards a game than the Eagles' pass D. And rushing, they're right there. Niners are the number 2 rush defense. Eagles are the number 3 rush defense. If either team can get to 130, 150 yards, that's going to put on the ground, it's going to put him in a better position to win. I'm trying to look at this objectively, take the fan hat off. I am actually going to take the Eagles the same score I took last year in the NFC Championship game, 24-20. If this game's in Santa Clara, I'd have the Niners winning 24-20, which is still why I am appalled the Niners are they're favored. If a lot of Vegas sportsbooks and people out there think the Niners are the better team right now, playing better football right now, to go into Philadelphia and be a 1.5 to 2.5 point favorite, still surprising to me. Again, I'm probably a little bit more cautious, negative, superstitious by nature. I want to see the Niners do it. They beat Dallas. They beat Pittsburgh. They beat Seattle. They haven't beaten a ton of good teams. Eagles are coming off of Kansas City and Buffalo. They're going through their gauntlet right now, right? And they beat Dallas once. Dallas, KC, Buffalo. Philly has proven its mettle. It hasn't looked pretty, but when you're playing good teams, if the Eagles were blowing out good teams, then I take a step back and go, oh man, this Eagles team is a 10-1 juggernaut. They beat the Bills by 3. They beat the Chiefs by 7, and the Cowboys was a 1-score game as well. But that's what good teams do. Good teams wins close games. The Niners haven't really shown it yet. They had opportunity to win one in Cleveland. That was on Jake Moody. They had an opportunity to win in Minnesota. Purdy threw 2 picks, and Cincy just played better than them. But those were games without Trent Williams, without Deebo Samuel. The Niners are healthy. I'm excited for this game. I'm not going to go into it pessimistic, and I'll be cheering my ass off, yelling at the screen. This is the game I had circled. This is the game I had circled, and I am super excited for it. But right now, I think the Eagles are being disrespected just a bit, and I think they know it. And as much as I want to punch Nick Sirianni in the face and probably the nuts too, I think his Eagles come out of this game 24-20 with the victory. I hope I am wrong. And if I am wrong, then things get so interesting in the NFC that the Niners would still have a shot at the number 1 seed, and it will be a great stretch run if the Niners can pull off the victory. But that concludes the 49ers section of the podcast for this week. Stick around in the plus section. We're going to be talking Packers, Lions, Jaguars, Texans, and Broncos, Browns. I'm going to go into college football championship weekend. The top 8 teams, except for Ohio State, are all playing for a conference championship. What that means, I'm going to review Star Wars The Last Command, the 90s book that ends the trilogy from Timothy Zahn, and make Week 13 NFL picks. Stay with us.
It's plus time.
So let's start off talking a couple NFL games. So the first, the opening game on Thanksgiving, the Packers going into Detroit and beating the Lions 29-22. The Lions held advantages in total yards, first downs, and time of possessions, but had 3 turnovers. All were Jared Goff fumbles. And this game got away from Detroit early. The Packers were up 23-6 at the half. Jordan Love had a good game, threw for 268 and 3 touchdowns. Goff had a comparable game in the air, 332 and 2 scores. Both teams ran the ball pretty well, 22 for 109 for the Packers, 31 for 140 and a touchdown for the Lions. But 3 turnovers, losing the turnover battle 0-3 for the Lions was too much to overcome, digging a 17-point hole at the half. And this is 2 straight games where Detroit does not look good. Previously, they squeaked out a victory against the Bears, had to come back. They were down by, I think, 10 or 12 points with 4 or 5 minutes to go. And Green Bay really led from, beginning to end. Lions are 8-3. I'm not going to go so far as to say that they're frauds, because 8-3 is still 8-3, and the schedule they have remaining isn't overly difficult. So I think even if they go 3-3 the rest of the way, that's 11 wins, and they're going to win the NFC North. But a little bit of the shine is off, especially when you are struggling with and losing to sub-500 teams. Jaguars in Houston in a game for first place in the AFC South. Actually, the Jags with the win, 24-21, now are 2 games up on the Texans. The Jags finished more yardage, more first downs, an 8-minute advantage in time of possession, and Jacksonville had the only turnover of the game. Houston had none. Even with that, the Jags never trailed. The Jags were up 10 in the second and 10 in the fourth quarter. Trevor Lawrence threw for 364, a touchdown and a pick. CJ Stroud, a better game, 304, 2 touchdowns through the air, 47 yards rushing, and 1 touchdown on the ground. Just a really weird game given how Stroud performed. The running game wasn't fantastic for the Texans between Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce. I think combined they both had less than 45 or 50 yards. And the Jags gave it away, but there was a game where, they were ahead. They were able to work through the turnover, control the clock, which meant keeping CJ Stroud on that explosive offense off the field, and they were up 24-14, and the Texans getting a late touchdown to pull within 3. But now the Jags up 2 games. Houston still looking good and really in the wild card mix. That was a good game and a good win for the Jaguars. Surprising outcome somewhat in Denver, where the Broncos beat the Browns 29-12. Turnovers, the Browns had 3, Broncos only 1. The Broncos did win the time of possession battle, had 5.5 more minutes possession. Russell Wilson, efficient game, and we know how good the Browns defense is statistically and can be most of the time, but Russell Wilson threw for only 134 yards and 1 touchdown. Denver did run it between Javonte Williams, P. Ryan, and McLaughlin, 39 times for 169 yards and 2 scores. And Denver was up 14-12 in the third and then scored the next 15 points, really put the clamps down. Now, the Browns started with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I don't know if he got injured or whatnot, but he came out. He came out, and PJ Walker went back in. Offense is struggling for Cleveland. You can only lean on their running game, which wasn't fantastic against Denver, and the defense so much. But the thought that Denver was going to put up 29 on the Browns defense is very, very surprising. Russell Wilson, I think his stat line for the year, 20 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He plays on any other team with a winning record, he's in the MVP conversation. He's not throwing for a ton of yards. Sometimes it's not the prettiest looking offense, but Sean Payton is letting Russ cook a bit. And he is, I feel like I say this every week, just responding with such a good bounce back season. Good for him, good for the Broncos, knocking off the Browns. And that's huge for wild card standings, right? If they end up with the same record, Denver gets the nod for the head-to-head win. So college football championship weekend as we transition, a slew of good games. Let's go through them. Number 5, Oregon versus number 3, Washington for the Pac-12 championship. Washington won that first matchup. Number 18, Oklahoma State versus number 7, Texas. Number 1, Georgia versus number 8, Alabama. Number 2, Michigan versus number 16, Iowa for the Big Ten. And number 14, Louisville versus number Florida State for the ACC. So you had obviously Big 12 and SEC in there as well. Here's how the teams fare. I kind of went through it, but let's just kind of rattle it off 1 through 8. Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, Oregon, Ohio State at 6, Texas, and Alabama. Of those 8, only Ohio State is not playing in a conference championship game since they lost to Michigan last weekend. Top 4 teams are undefeated. Teams 5 through 8 have 1 loss. So I think there's agreement that if teams ranked 1 through 4 all win, that they're all automatically in the playoff, because it would be hard for, no matter how, at this point, actually, how Texas would look, because they would be the only team behind them. There's no way they're going to leapfrog a Florida State, even though they're missing their quarterback and best player. Georgia, Michigan, Washington, and Florida State all win. They're all undefeated. They are all going to the playoff. Where things get interesting is, so Alabama's 8th, Texas 7th, Ohio State is 6th. If Alabama beats Georgia and Florida State, so I mean, there's so much going on here. Alabama can get in if they beat Georgia, if Florida State loses, if Michigan and Washington win, because then I think Alabama will leapfrog Texas and Ohio State to get the number 4 seed because the SEC is the best conference in the nation. But I can understand the argument also that if both Alabama and Texas win their respective games, remember Texas is 7, Alabama is 8, and let's say both do so, both win by maybe 10 or more. Texas beat Alabama head-to-head. That's Alabama's only loss. I could see Texas fans saying, well, why are you leapfrogging us? We beat you head-to-head. And that was very early in the season. Is there a path for Ohio State to get in at 6? Will they get in if Washington, Florida State... So Washington and Florida State are 3 and 4. That means number 5 Oregon would beat number 3 Florida State. Oregon's in. And Texas would have to lose to Oklahoma State, and Alabama would have to lose to Georgia behind them. It's possible. I mean, but then you could say, does a one-loss Ohio State team deserve to get in over then a one-loss Washington team? Because if Oregon beats Washington, and they played a great game earlier on in the season, if Oregon beats Washington, will Washington drop out of the top 4? If Florida State loses as well, I can't imagine, unless Washington gets blown out. If it's a close enough game, I just can't see how you can move Ohio State into the top 4, and they never played a conference championship game. And Washington did, and they lost. So they're going to be penalized for having the same number of losses as Ohio State, but they just lost 1 week later. I think the committee just would love to see 1 through 4 win. There's no argument or discussion over anything, but there could be some interesting choices made if teams on the back end... Imagine if 1 through 4 all lose, Georgia, Michigan, Washington, and Florida State. Then I think you would... maybe Georgia falls to 4 and stays in, but everybody else would kind of go in. It could get very, very wacky. I don't think Florida State can. If Florida State right now is 4, they can't play with Georgia with a backup quarterback. They just can't. So I'm hoping something happens where Florida State gets bumped out and say like an Alabama or a Texas comes in, which means Georgia would have to lose. I can't see Florida State hanging. Michigan has been really good all season. Washington as well, but they've got a tricky game against Oregon. I don't think I'm going to be watching football stem to stern on Saturday. I don't care enough about college football, but man, there are good games on that have a lot of implications, which we'll discuss on the podcast early next week. So let's transition now to Star Wars, novels, science fiction, non-canon books that don't quote unquote count anymore. So book 3 in the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn from the early 90s, Star Wars The Last Command. I finished the audiobook recently. Again, Mark Thompson as the narrator does a fantastic job. Highly recommended. Some of the high points from this book: Leia, who's pregnant, gives birth to twins, Jason and Jaina. The New Republic couldn't figure out what the Empire and Grand Admiral Thrawn were doing, how they were getting so much intel, but they wind up finding droids that were spying on discussions and negotiations in the what they're calling the Imperial Palace, but that's where the New Republic is convening meetings on Coruscant. One of the cooler scenes and even just strategic things that happened in this trilogy was Grand Admiral Thrawn launching an attack on Coruscant in which he launched 22 asteroids which were cloaked in orbit over Coruscant, and then launched 250 or over 250, had 250 false launches. But the New Republic couldn't discern the difference between them. So they thought that there was almost 300 asteroids or pieces of debris in orbit that was preventing them from launching any fighters from the planet. So because of that, they raised their planetary shields. But when you do that, no one can get in, but also no one can get out. So Thrawn was looking to basically strangle and starve out, Coruscant, or just make them a non-factor until that was eventually figured out by the New Republic and they were able to overcome it. Mara Jade, the former Emperor's hand, knows where the mad clone Jedi Jax-Hou is. She knows where the planet Wayland is. That's where Joruus is residing, because she was taken there once or twice with the Emperor. So she goes with Luke, Han, Chewie, and Lando to the planet and to find where Mount Tantus is, because in that mountain is the cloning facility, and that's where Joruus is holed up and basically has foreseen that an attack on him is coming. When they get there, Luke and Mara take on C'baoth, who wound up, while he was there, making a clone of Luke Skywalker. And he calls this clone Luke, and it's spelled with two U's, which just early 90s nonsense. That was like the only misstep, like in terms of something ridiculous in these books. From Luke's severed hand in Empire Strikes Back. And this clone of Luke Skywalker also has the original Luke's blue lightsaber that he lost in Empire Strikes Back when Darth Vader cut his hand off. So that was a nice nod back to a plot thread, or some, at least at the time, 30 years ago, something that happened in in the Empire Strikes Back that maybe you don't really give much thought of until, oh crap, Luke Skywalker is going up against a clone of himself. Like that's pretty cool, and something I would have loved to see live action as a movie. Mara winds up killing the clone of Luke, and that actually winds up satisfying. She keeps hearing the Emperor's voice in her head that you will kill Luke Skywalker, and it was kind of driving her mad at points. And the Emperor was right to say that, because in a way, Luke led to the Emperor's death in Return of the Jedi when Vader picks him up and throws him down the reactor shaft. But she wound up killing a Luke Skywalker, right? The clone, not the original Luke Skywalker. Once she did that, the Emperor's voice in her head was silenced. As for Grand Admiral Thrawn, like now there's like battles after the planet Coruscant was kind of freed of that asteroid threat. New Republic sends its fleet. They're fighting with Thrawn. Thrawn is actually killed by one of his Nogri bodyguards. His name is Ruck. And once Ruck finds out about the Empire and Thrawn betraying the Nogri, his race of people, and the Empire's responsible for devastating the homeworld of the Nogri, Ruck kills him with his dagger, and then winds up fleeing, tries to kill Captain Pellaeon, who was, Thrawn's number one, wasn't able to do that, or just flees, so Thrawn dies on his Star Destroyer, the Chimera. At the end, Luke gives Mara his blue lightsaber and, offers to train her as a Jedi. They don't immediately get married. She doesn't immediately, come to the light side or want to be a Jedi. She goes her own way for a couple more books before they reconnect and ultimately get married. But that was a nice gesture, and just, seeing how in canon, in non-canon Star Wars books, Luke's blue lightsaber goes to Mara Jade. In the movies, the blue lightsaber goes to Rey. You never found out in the movies how Maz Kanata in The Force Awakens gets the blue lightsaber. You never hear anything about what happened to Luke's hand. So these are things that, and this is the only story, non-canon or canon, that references Luke's severed hand and does something with it, creates a clone. And that would have been, to me, an interesting way, when episode 9 was coming out and interviews as you're leading up to it, and when it was announced that the Emperor was returning, ridiculously, J.J. Abrams, director and co-writer, along with Chris Terrio of The Rise of Skywalker, said they really needed to find a way to tie the trilogies together. Well, I don't know why they felt like they couldn't, use the severed hand, and a clone of a young Luke Skywalker versus Rey would have been so much better than Palpatine versus, it could have been Palpatine and a clone of Luke versus Rey and Kylo Ren. Otherwise it was a 2-on-1 at the end of Rise of Skywalker. They could have borrowed that aspect of it. And how cool would that have been in the last? And then you're really tying the trilogies together. You're bringing back the clone of an original character from the original trilogy. You're bringing back the idea of cloning from the prequel trilogy, That would have been such a, and it was right there for Abrams to borrow from. And he did not want to, and instead used the Emperor as some sort of a proxy for Rey's heritage. But I mentioned previously how, again, these books would not have made a good 7, 8, and 9 movies. Just from, I think, an action standpoint, there would have had to have been different set pieces and action pieces, and definitely lightsaber battles. But I think episode 7 could have ended with a Luke versus Mara lightsaber battle. He obviously doesn't, kill her, but they kind of go their separate ways. Think of Kylo Ren and Rey fighting at the end of The Force Awakens on the planet that's snowing. Episode 8 could have been Luke versus Jorah Seaboth. That could have been a stalemate as well. So maybe someone gets a hand cut off because that's a Star Wars staple, but nobody dies. And then episode 9, you have the tag team of Luke and Mara versus Jorah Seaboth and the clone of Luke, which you ultimately had in the book. But that I think would have that at least you would have had a lightsaber battle per movie. It would have culminated in a character who started out disliking Luke and trying to kill him, to being on his side and trying to defeat two evil clones, actually, at that point. All water in the bridge. They're, as much as you can see online that, Disney's thinking about retconning or redoing the sequel trilogy, it's never going to happen, nor should it, right? They're moving forward with their new movies. The new Rey movie, the new movie that'll take place after Ahsoka, and then the new movie about the Dawn of the Jedi, thousands or 20,000 years in the past. But again, if you are a Star Wars fan, books are 14 hours each in terms of an audiobook. The narrator's fantastic, and it's a nice what could have been. And they're solid stories. They just don't adapt to cinema all that well. You'd have to tweak it. Solid stories that set the foundation for Star Wars, literary media, books and comic books to come. And here we are 30 years later, because I think The Last Command came out in 1993. So let's conclude with Week 13 NFL picks. The Thursday night Amazon Prime game, Seattle at Dallas. Seahawks coming off of a drubbing on Thanksgiving night. Dallas gave a drubbing to the Commanders on Thanksgiving afternoon. Dak is playing really well. Geno probably healthier against Dallas than he has been previously. Can't root for either one of these teams, but a Dallas victory actually helps the Niners out by giving the Seahawks another loss in the NFC West, so I'll take Dallas. Indianapolis at Tennessee. Colts running back Jonathan Taylor is out, broke his finger, had surgery, he's out for a couple of weeks. I think the rest of the Colts offensive and defensive squads, I think, will handle Tennessee and get the victory. The Chargers at the Patriots. Man, the Patriots are anemic offensively. They're terrible. Mac Jones got benched again for Bailey Zappi. I don't know if Belichick has announced what quarterback's going to start. Does it matter? They both suck. Chargers really aren't much better, but they are better, and they will get the win. Detroit at New Orleans. I went back and forth with this one. Both teams need this game. New Orleans is tied with Atlanta, a game under 500, leading the AFC South. Detroit is a couple games up on Minnesota in the North. I think Detroit bounces back and gets the victory. Atlanta at the Jets. Looks like it's going to be Tim Boyle with Trevor Siemian backing up and Zach Wilson as QB3 inactive. Call me crazy, I'm going to take the Jets. I think the Jets defense can control a Falcons offense that is very one-dimensional. If you take the runaway, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, and make, I don't know, is it Ritter, is it Heineke, whoever's going to quarterback, beat you throwing, I think that secondary of the Jets could probably get turnovers, and the Jets defense might outscore the Falcons offense this game. Although, Tim Boyle is such a wild card and bad quarterback that who knows what's going to happen, but I will take the Jets. Arizona at Pittsburgh. Arizona just has nothing on either side of the ball. Give me the Steelers. Miami at Washington. I think Washington flirting with the idea of a wild card is over. Sam Howell is passing for a ton of yards. The defense can't stop anybody. Miami will win. Denver at Houston. Good game. Playoff implications. Another game that will be a head-to-head wild card tiebreaker. For the winner, I will take Houston. Denver has looked good. Denver keeps defying the odds. I will take Houston, CJ Stroud, and that offense at home. And the Broncos are the worst run defense in the league, at least for fantasy football running backs. So Singletary and Dameon Pierce may have a day. Carolina at Tampa Bay. Carolina firing head coach Frank Reich. I just want to know, what did David Tepper and anybody in senior management for the Panthers think was going to happen this season? You trade away your best player in DJ Moore, plus a first-round pick, plus other multiple picks to trade up for Bryce Young. Offensively, you brought in Miles Sanders. I'm not going to say he's washed up, but you shouldn't have given him money. He's being outperformed at running back by Chuba Hubbard. Defensively, the Panthers are playing okay. They're a top half of the league defense. They are 1-10. Frank Reich, was he the problem? I don't think so. I think this team is kind of where it should be. Are we saying that if they were 3-8, that's so much better that Frank Reich should be keeping his job? CJ Stroud got Frank Reich fired. I'm not saying that Frank Reich wanted CJ Stroud, but when you're David Tepper, the owner of the Panthers, and you're looking over at the Texans, but the Texans was more than CJ Stroud. They drafted Tank Dell. They brought in Devin Singletary, new head coach. They traded up for Will Anderson as an edge rusher, so they had 2 first-round picks. Houston had more pieces than Carolina. Their divisions are comparably bad, although obviously Jacksonville is going to kind of walk away with that division. But CJ Stroud's performance and Bryce Young's lack of performance is what did him in, and we'll see what the Panthers wind up doing next year. But the Buccaneers are going to get the win. Getting back to the picks, Cleveland at the Rams. I'll take the Rams. They're a fun, feisty team. They can throw the ball now that they have their starting running back, plus backup running back Royce Freeman. They can run it a little bit. Cleveland does have obviously a very good defense. Although when you have a very good defense, teams shouldn't be scoring on them the way that they are. Who knows who the quarterback is going to be? They're a little bit of a mess offensively. I will take the Rams. I'm assuming it's an upset. I haven't looked at the line. I took the Eagles over the Niners. Kansas City at Green Bay is the Sunday night game. Might be a good one. Would be a good one 2 years ago. But if Jordan Love can be efficient, maybe get 2 touchdowns through the air, the Chiefs defense is good. We'll see if Aaron Jones comes back, running back for the Packers. And Kansas City, let's see that ball distribution beyond Travis Kelce. Is it going to be Rice? Is it going to be Valdez-Scantling who keeps dropping passes? Is it going to be Sky Moore? Can they commit to the running game with Pacheco and McKinnon and Edwards-Helaire? Regardless of how all that gets answered, the Chiefs are going to win in Green Bay. And the Monday night game, which looked sexy 3 weeks ago, Cincinnati at Jacksonville, is no longer sexy. No Joe Burrow, no real chance for the Bengals. I'm going to take Jacksonville there to keep its 2-game lead over the Houston Texans in the AFC South. And that concludes the podcast for this week. This will be the only podcast this week. But next week, we're going to get back to our 2 podcasts a week format, probably Monday and Thursday. But between now and then, some good sports on. If you're watching NHL, if you're watching the NBA in-season tournament, some teams have either clinched their brackets or groups. I think the Knicks got in as a wild card for whatever that means. I think the tournament's coming up in 2 weeks in Las Vegas. Great slate of college football on Saturday, and some big games will start off. Thursday night's not a bad game. Seattle at Denver. You got Denver at Houston, Cleveland at the Rams. The Sunday night game's good. Chiefs at Packers. And of course, the 425, the one that I'll be watching. And if you're listening to this podcast, as long as it's on national television, you'll be watching it too. Niners at Eagles. Hope I'm wrong. Hopefully the Niners can pull it out, but good weekend of football ahead. Until we speak again, everyone stay happy, stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Take care.